quick disclaimer, this is just an excerpt from a Metro board meeting in July. In March, a motion was filed to study extending the Metro Red Line subway as far south as the Green Line, all the way down Vermont Avenue. And in July, Metro staff reported back to the Metro board regarding this project, and it got zero coverage in any local media. So that's why I'm posting this on YouTube, is just to get this excerpt of the meeting, which I think is an important development in the Metro Red Line subway extension project. And I just wanted to get that out on YouTube. I'm going to do a more expansive, better video about this in the future that is more like my traditional videos, but for now I just wanted to get this out there so people could review the excerpt of the board meeting that discussed the Vermont Avenue subway extension without having to wade through the entire more than an hour-long meeting. So that's what this is, and stay tuned for the full Vermont subway video, which I will be uploading at some point in the future, although I'm not going to commit to a specific date. But yeah, this is a July meeting of Metro's planning and programming.
Item 19, we have the Vermont Avenue Corridor Rail Feasibility Study, and this is receive and file.
I'm David Meager, Executive Officer for Transit Corridor Planning here at Metro, and the presentation today will be given by Martha Butler of our Bus Rapid Transit Program on the Vermont BRT project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members. This item is a receive and file on the Vermont Transit Corridor in response to a March 23rd board motion directing staff to also consider rail for this corridor as well. As some of you may recall, we were actually before this committee in March with some of the findings and recommendations from the Vermont BRT technical study. At that time, staff had reported that we had identified 4 initial BRT concepts, of which 2 appeared to be those promising in terms of delivering on the benefits and opportunities to improve and enhance the existing service on the corridor. At the March 23rd meeting, however, there was a board motion approved that directed staff to do several things. Firstly, it directed staff to move forward with the Vermont BRT project as a more near-term phase 1 transit improvement on the corridor, but it also directed staff to also consider rail, including a potential extension of the Red Line from the Wilshire, Vermont station down to the Exposition line at Expo in Vermont as a phase 1, and then a further extension along the corridor as a phase 2. In response to that board motion, staff is augmenting the BRT technical study to add an additional scope of work that would address these issues. We will be conducting a rail feasibility study. That study will look at a couple of things. It'll look at, will it actually go back and reevaluate the BRT concepts to make sure that any BRT design implemented on the corridor would not preclude a future conversion to rail. It'll also evaluate and compare multiple rail modes and or alternatives, including looking at their engineering feasibility, their operability, cost and benefits, as well as potential environmental impacts. And this work effort will delay the environmental view of the corridor by at least a couple months, 24 months, in order to give staff enough time to secure a contract and complete this augmented study. Staff will keep the board apprised of this study, and we will definitely return to the board with the final results once complete. And with that, if there's any questions.
Any questions, directors? Supervisor Solis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarification. I want to understand that how this fits into what we are expected to see in terms of this project that has been part of our planning that takes us into 50 years. We're not there yet. what I'm trying to say is that while we're looking at planning things, we're going to do a study, an EIR study, say in 2 years, for a project that isn't supposed to be funded until 2067.
Supervisor, let me respond to your question. What we've laid out here, we hope, are allowing two important goals to take place simultaneously. One is to ensure that we can do the preliminary work necessary to implement BRT in the Vermont corridor as soon as possible. I think it's very clear from the work we've done to date that that heavily used corridor and the communities along it deserve, as quickly as we can, a major improvement to bus service in that corridor. At the same time, given the motion's request to essentially jumpstart a shovel-ready initiative relative to looking at rail in the corridor, we're taking this interim step to, and I think the term was used during the Sepulveda Pass effort, a technical study that in essence could sort of clear the brush of what the most feasible alternatives for rail would be in order to expedite some future deeper dive environmental analysis for a rail project should we be directed by the board to do so. So we want to make sure that we're not delaying the effort to implement BRT in this quarter. That's incredibly important, and I think the board had reinforced that even with the motion back in March. But at the same time, provide a basis for a future potential environmental look at detailed rail in the corridor by doing these preliminary steps as a technical analysis. So that's how we're trying to accomplish both those objectives at the same time.
I understand we at our last board meeting that we did want to look at this as another alternative, the rail. But I also want to just be very cautious that there are other parts of the county, obviously, that and cities that are very peak at looking at how we move forward on things and what signal that gives. So I just want to caution us and the board when we think about that. I mean, this is a very important line. I get it. BRT is very important. It's very heavily populated there, densely populated. But just to kind of let people know that it is something that I know will come up. So,
Thank you. Director Najarian?
Thank you. I'd like to echo those remarks. It's been a long time, but at one point this agency was quite in conflict over allegations of projects leapfrogging over and others. That being said, the second, I guess the sister corridor project to the Vermont is the North Hollywood Pasadena. And if the studies that you're doing here are high level, and if they're not taking a lot of staff time, or if there's lessons that we can apply to the sister corridor from the studies that you're doing in the Vermont corridor, I'd love for you to share them and pass them off to the group that's looking at the BRT from the North Hollywood to Pasadena line as well.
Okay, we certainly could.
I mean, I don't want to blow any budgets. I don't want to dump a whole lot of staff time, but to the extent that you're learning things as you're proceeding forward with this, and it can be applied, at least the information shared with other corridors, and not just North Hollywood, Pasadena, but other corridors as well. San Gabriel Valley, no reason why we're not sharing the learned knowledge that we have from this process. How does that sound, Mr. Washington? Is that?
Yes.
I mean, I don't want to overstep, and I don't want to leapfrog, but to the extent that we're learning things as we're studying and incorporating design features, let's say, in the BRT that may at some point become a light rail, that should be shared countywide as we think about BRT projects that all want to grow up to be a light rail. I mean, that's what they all want to do, but there are constraints.
I don't know if
some are very happy with BRTs.
yeah. I don't know if Therese was going to respond.
No. I was just going to make the observation. We had also noted earlier that we are launching a comprehensive countywide BRT assessment. That would be an opportunity to, as you know, if there are lessons learned, to see as we could integrate into that. So we'll keep that in mind.
Thank you, Teresa and team, for the presentation. And in March, when Mayor Garcetti, Supervisor Ridley-Thomas, and I introduced this motion, it was because of the very strong participation in the community meetings that were being held regarding the Vermont corridor. And it is a very long corridor. And in attending the meetings, I started to wonder how we ever address the needs, because the questions in Hollywood were very different than the questions in Koreatown versus those in Expo Park. And I hadn't gotten to the meetings further south. But it is the challenge that we know our team is equal to. I think in March, when we brought forward the motion, we were also looking at North Hollywood. And I've been reminded it is the third most heavily traveled bus line in our system. What I've learned since then is Vermont is not only the second most heavily traveled in our system, but one of the highest transit riderships in the country. And so we have an obligation to this ridership to do something, not to the detriment of anyone else, but I think fully justify the energy that's put in, and nothing will be lost on other lines. In fact, I believe as we were making this motion and we were talking about Measure M, we had some stakeholders from the broader community who said that our lack of concentration on Vermont was a sign of environmental justice issues. And so we want to keep those voices understanding that we are clear about equity in the system at the same time that we address the most critical needs. So I am pleased with the staff's approach to implementing the rapid transit, in addition to looking at the rail opportunity, and especially with the activities that are beginning to happen in the Vermont corridor. USC is always there as a major stakeholder, being the second largest private employer in the county, but also with the soccer stadium under construction in Exposition Park, and then 2 weeks ago the announcement of the Lucas Museum. And so we see this as becoming more and more one of those regional transit lines that Metro can be in a position to address. And I just want to know that we're watching closely and want to provide any assistance in terms of the community outreach and continued work on this project to take a look at the possibility and feasibility and appropriateness of the transit system along with the BRT. So with the difference in width of this corridor and traffic and the community's diversity and various requests, we know that this is a project that will have many lessons learned for the remainder of the county, because it touches almost every major cultural group we have in LA County. And so we look forward to the continued updates. And in fact, Director Najarian, I was a little afraid that NOHO was moving forward and Vermont was getting a little behind with the statement they're going to be 18 months delayed action. And so I think Therese talked me off the edge of the mountain, and I understand that we have 6 months of procurement to find a consultant to actually honor the request we made regarding the rail and then to move forward. So I believe that this is going to be one of the best examples of how we can grow transportation lines as our ridership increases, because surely that is our goal, to increase ridership by providing transportation where it's needed, when it's needed, and that's extremely important. Mr. Washington?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments. These are general comments, not specific to the Vermont corridor, but it's our intent, staff's intent, to implement this program according to the ordinance, in accordance to the schedule or the attachment A, and also the timelines that we took to voters. That is not to say that there are not opportunities for acceleration. I think we need to have a larger conversation, and we want to bring this to the board in September, a larger conversation on the possibility of really comprehensive acceleration. What is a comprehensive acceleration program? Understanding that there are, these are the words that sort of I've come up with, accelerators and decelerators associated with projects. And there could be a case to be made that there are decelerators out there for projects that are no fault of this agency. Now, we're going to bring those things to the board, both accelerators and decelerators, in a transparent way, and we are going to talk to you about the possibility for accelerations and possible decelerators. We will not, as a staff, be involved with, slick and clever moves to accelerate projects without the knowledge of the board. And so I just want to put that out, that there's going to be opportunities. We have to have a larger discussion about accelerators and decelerators on various projects. And we need to have a discussion when we believe, from a staff perspective, that decelerators that occur on projects are not the fault of this agency. Because in the ordinance, it talks about you can't accelerate a project if it negatively impacts other projects. However, in my mind, there's going to be decelerators or slowdowns on projects that are not the fault of this agency. So there's a case to be made that we are not negatively impacting projects because it's not our fault. And so that's what we're going to bring to you. We need to have a larger discussion on this, but we are implementing this program according to the ordinance that was approved.
Thank you, Mr. Washington, and for broadening our thinking. I'll have to remember the decelerators. I'm anxious to have that discussion. Yeah. Thank you very much for your presentation and the robust conversation that followed.
So if you made it this far, thanks for watching and thanks for caring about current events and public transportation in Southern California. Please subscribe, and I will be putting out the new video relatively soon. It actually goes into a lot more depth about the Southern Vermont Avenue subway extension, and that's going to be a little bit less dry than this, but I did just really want to get this out here. But yeah, thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.